Hello, back to you in today's video. It's JMA Friday, so we're going to have a look at the coming month from a Japanese model. This one takes us up, can you believe, to Christmas Day, the Japanese month head update. So we'll have a look at the 500 bar heights from Japanese model in a moment. Also have a look at the CFS, and then try and have a look at what's happening next week. It's a real nightmare trying to pin down next week's weather. Actually, talking about weather a month away, we're still not all that sure about what's happening next week, just how cool it could be, or whether it's a relatively mild week. I think we've swung back to high pressure being more centrally located over the country, actually, so probably relatively cool actually next week, with the risk of frost and fog at night. But we'll have a look at all the charts in a moment. Before I get on with that, just want to say about the ads. There's links to articles sitting underneath the weather video here on my homepage at gazweathervids.com. Have a browse through the widget. If there's any articles that you're interested in, just click through. You have to go off and read those articles. There's an ad unit down near the comment box. They're mainly weather related, so if there's any articles there that you're interested in, or any links there that you're interested in, click through. There's green keyword ads on some of the pages. If you roll cursor over green keywords, they'll display ad. With click through the word, go to advertise website. Be supporting gazweathervids.com by doing that. And Gaz Shop is open, and it's been open since the start of November. It remains open, so if you've got any Christmas shopping to do at Amazon between now and Christmas, just click through the Amazon banners in Gaz Shop, and it'll take you to Amazon, and you'll be able to do Christmas shopping there as normal. But because you've gone through from Gazweathervids to Amazon, we get a royalty fee on the things that you're purchasing. Thanks very much for getting involved and helping to support the website. So just starting off with the Central England temperature from Hadley. Another very mild month for this November. Central England temperature coming out provisionally at 8.5, which is an anomaly again, well above average, 1.7 degrees above average. That's provisional to the 27th of November. As we know, I've shown you this chart very regularly through the year. Every month except for August comes out well above average. August, the joker in the pack, that comes out well below average, and it's actually the coldest August in the midst of all this warmth. It was the coldest August since 1993. Quite hard to believe how that one worked out, but otherwise it's been an exceptionally warm year. It looks like we're on course of the warmest year on record. Quite easily, probably, unless we have a really cold December. I think that record is going to fall, and those records go back to 1659, so you're going to be hearing a huge amount about this, I would suspect, towards the end of the year. There'll be a lot on the news in the papers that we've beaten this very long-standing record. Worth remembering, we've had a very cold year across the United States, so there has been plenty of cold around, just hasn't been on our side of the Atlantic, but they've had a really cold year over in America. Right, let's get on with the JMA Friday, the Japanese update. 500 millibar heights broken down into weekly periods. As always with 500 millibar heights, the orange curves are extrapolating to high pressure, above average heights, high pressure. The blue curves extrapolating to below average heights, which is low pressure. So the first weekly period takes us from the 27th of November to the 4th of December. British Isles just here upside down, and relatively easy to work out what's going on with this. We've got quite a lot of above average heights reaching through the country, so it implies there's quite a bit of high pressure actually coming through the country. Low pressure cut off around Spain and Portugal, going to give them really quite a soaking. But for us across northern Europe, lots of anticyclonic influences, so mainly dry. Could be really quite cold across central eastern parts of Europe where that high pressure is centred. For us, again, it's just whether that jet stream niggles in to the north of the high pressure, or whether we get that high pressure actually stuck over top of the country, as to whether we have a mild-ish or a cold-ish week. But the coldest temperatures with that high pressure will be across central parts of Europe and Eastern Europe as well. Now, as we go through to the second week period, this one takes us from the 4th to the 11th of December. All very similar, although the above average heights probably moving up more towards the northeast actually, and heights lowering across country. They are below average for the heights, but they are lowering, so possibly turning a little bit more unsettled through that period from the 4th to the 11th of December. But overall, still relatively large amounts of high pressure influences, probably keeping it mainly settled. But that could be a transitional sort of period, starting off quite dry and then probably becoming a little bit more unsettled. Not overly cold, I would suggest, with that one. Although again, Central Eastern Europe, probably does get a bit cold there. Now for the final 2-week period, taking us from the 11th to the 25th, quite a significant change around taking place then. We're setting up an area of below average heights right over the top of the country. That's a trough of low pressure. It's difficult to say with this one. We've got this area of above average heights here, more or less centred over the top of the North Pole. So the area of high pressure is there, probably not in a position to be bringing cold air into that trough. But if that high pressure, the above average heights, was to go any further towards Greenland, it's got to go that way. If it's going to go any further towards Greenland, it would, I think, start to introduce much colder air into that trough. So I'm not sure what's going on with that one. The trough is there over the country. We haven't really got a great deal of blocking above it, although there is the suggestion there that there is blocking across the top of the pole. But not quite sure what's going on with that one. But it'll be interesting to see where that goes as we get into next week's update. If that area of yellows gets set up over Greenland with this trough underneath it, that could start to be introducing a much colder pattern as we go through into the end of December. So we'll leave that one alone for this week, and we'll have a look at that again next week. The CFS B2 weekly forecast, this first week period, takes us from the 27th of November to the 4th of December. Again, same idea, red is extrapolated to high pressure, green and blue extrapolated to the below average heights, low pressure. So for the coming week, we've got a lot of anticyclonic influences through the country. Again, high pressure is dominant. It could be relatively cold over that area of above average heights, depending on its exact position. Most central north and east parts of Europe will be cold under the high pressure, but whether we are, it just depends whether the jet's coming in or not. But relatively settled anyway. It's going to be really quite dry as we go through into next week. Now, the week beyond that, the 4th to the 10th of December, shows again above average heights setting up more or less over the top of the country. Notice this area of below average heights around western parts of Russia. That could be introducing very cold air down into the east of Europe, so they could get a real cold blast early on in December across east and possibly in some southeast parts of Europe. Could be one of those scenarios where we're seeing snowfall piling up across the Balkans, possibly down into Romania and some parts of Greece and Turkey as well. But for us, we're into this area of above average heights, so it's still largely settled. Heights probably weakening a little bit. So again, this is a transitional period, but the JMA was seeing this could again be a transitional period, possibly turning a little bit more unsettled from the Atlantic. As we go through to the next week period, takes us from the 11th to the 17th. Big change around again, very similar to what we're just looking at from the JMA. We're setting up this area of below average heights to the north of Scotland, so an area of low pressure is in there. High pressure is pushing out into the central part of the Atlantic. So that isn't again particularly cold, but we've got the low pressure in just there. The coldest air is probably going down there, out in the central part of the Atlantic actually. But if we were to just generate a little bit more blocking up over Greenland, we could start to introduce some colder air into that trough. And as we go through to the final week period, taking us from the 18th to Christmas Eve, 24th of December, well, big trough sitting over the country then. It's centred right over the British Isles and possibly stretching out into the North Sea as well. That could be a little bit better for introducing cold air into that trough of low pressure. So probably turning much more unsettled into the second half of December. Wouldn't necessarily say will, but on the trends that we're seeing from the JMA and the CFS here, could turn a little bit colder into the second half of December as well. I did the update looking at the Beijing Climate Centre, and that again is signaling the chance of some colder conditions as we get through towards the end of December as well. It just depends whether we can stick some high pressure up over Greenland or not. The JMA and the CFS are a bit unsure about that, not really going for it, but it's interesting how this trough is becoming centred over the top of the country, and it's normally that starts to introduce that colder air if you get blocking to the north of it. So watch this space. It'll be interesting to see where things go as we get into the latter stages of December. Could be an interesting Christmas coming up perhaps. Now let's have a look at what's going on next week, and this is the GFS for Tuesday. Here comes the high pressure out in the Atlantic. We've brought the cold front down, which brings cooler air with it, of course. Going to be a very mild weekend, but it turns cooler into start of next week. Now, does the high pressure sit over the country? Well, on the latest run of the GFS, it's 6 o'clock, it more or less is in there over the country. We're bringing milder air into Scotland, but the rest of the country relatively cool, I think, with that, particularly at night, with a risk of frost and fog. Going through to Thursday, the 4th, again, the high pressure more or less over the top of the country, so it could be getting really quite cold under that high pressure with a risk of frost and fog. We're not talking about depths of winter, we're not talking about snow or anything like that, just seasonably cold, really, with chilly days, cold nights, frost and fog, and if the fog lingers on into today, of course, it could be quite cold then by day. Now, as we move through to day 10, the GFS wants to collapse that high pressure down to the south and introduce this westerly flow off the Atlantic. That's Monday the 8th, bringing the low pressure back in. And of course, remember, the JMA and BCFS are signalling a change as we get through to that period from around the 4th to the 11th. It's beginning to weaken a little bit, going up towards the second week of the month, and the GFS is indicating that somewhat, so maybe a transitional period then. The ECWS shows the high pressure reaching through midweek next week, so again quite chilly, frost and fog potentially at night, chilly by day. The high pressure as go through to Thursday is in there across the country, so it's going to be relatively cool if that comes off, with frost and fog at night, colder by day if the fog lingers. High reaching through the country on Friday, so a quiet week next week, lots of dry weather away from northern Scotland, but it could be chilly, especially at night, and just generally feeling pleasantly seasonable, I think, if you want it cooler around Christmas. Now, a little bit different to the GFS with the ECM as we get through to Saturday the 6th. The high pressure is going out into the west, introducing this northerly wind. I'm not sure about that. That looks a little bit odd, but that's what the ECM is doing this morning, introducing a northerly flow by next weekend. That quickly collapses, and then we're back into the high reaching through the country, really. But it's still relatively cool with that. So the ECM is seeing quite a cool period coming up, actually, from around Tuesday. We could have a week's worth of temperatures on the chilly side if that comes up, but I'm not sure about that northerly. But let's concentrate on the high pressure reaching through. The GM, finally the Canadian model, this is for Thursday the 4th of December, game high pressure reaching through. This is a little bit milder for Scotland with this westerly flow, but for England and Wales probably quite chilly with risk of frost and fog at night. Similar to the E70F with the GM, that it takes high pressure out in the Atlantic and starts to ridge up towards Greenland, making more of it than the E70F, so that by the time we go through, if a chart clicks over, but by the time we go through to the next chart, which I think is going to be for Saturday the 6th of December, there we go, we're introducing a really cold northerly wind there, with high pressure probably reaching through the Atlantic and going up towards Greenland. Again, I'm not at all sure about that, really. I think that's over the top, it's overdone. The GM is often different in its extended range, so don't take that too seriously, but that's certainly the indication there from the Canadian model that we aimed up by the time we get through to around the 6th, 7th, 8th December with a really cold northerly northeasterly wind blasting in. If that did come off, it would be bringing snow to much of the north and the east of the country by that chart, day 10, Monday the 8th. But I would discount it, really. I thought I'd show you it just so that you could see it, what it's showing, but I would discount it. I think it's over the top. We may get a little bit of a northerly if the ECM is right, but I don't see anything particularly cold coming up for the foreseeable future. So I think we'll bring the high pressure in next week. It's going to be a largely dry week with a lot of potentially a lot of frost and fog at night, particularly from Tuesday night through towards the last stages of the week. High pressure may pull back into the Atlantic by next weekend, introducing something a little bit colder from the north perhaps, but overall a pleasantly seasonable feeling period coming up, not particularly mild once we get this weekend out of the way, and feeling like it should be really for the early part of December. The extended period, things could be looking interesting as go through to the latter stages of December, but I want to see more from the JMA really next week to see whether that trough that's setting up over the country is entrenched with cold air or not. So that's it now. Very interesting update. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll do a weekend forecast tomorrow, so go back for that. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.